Your villa now belongs to your daughters-in-laws. That sentence broke me more than the death of my wife. Because grief, I understood. Betrayal, especially from your own blood, is something else entirely. I was sipping my morning tea in the courtyard when the letter came. It wasn't the postman this time. It was a man in a suit with a cold, rehearsed expression. He handed me the envelope like he was delivering an obituary. I tore it open without much thought. My name was on it, yes, but what followed made my hands go numb. A legal declaration of voluntary property transfer from me to Alina, and from Alina to her husband's family, finalized, stamped, registered. It had to be a mistake, a forgery, a cruel joke maybe. I stood there reading it over and over. As if the words would change. They didn't. It said I had willingly given away the very home I built brick by brick, not sold, given, no compensation. No condition. Nothing, just handed over like a used piece of furniture. I stumbled into the living room. Alina was there, fixing a bouquet in the vase like it was a normal day. The kind of quiet, practiced grace I'd seen her mother do so many times, except today there was no comfort in it. Alina, I said, my voice barely recognizable. What is this? I held the papers out like they were poison. She turned slowly, brushing her hair behind her ear, and said it with no emotion. It's done, Dad. The house is theirs now. That's how marriage works. That's how marriage works. I took a step back. She sounded like she was reading off a script. Her eyes didn't meet mine. She didn't even look guilty, just tired. You know what you've done? I asked, my voice cracking. This is your mother's house, your childhood, my life's work. Her lips trembled for half a second, barely noticeable, and then she hardened again. Zayan's parents need a proper place. They've never had a real home. It was just a gesture of respect. A gesture. I scoffed, heat rising in my chest. You don't give away someone else's soul as a gesture. She didn't answer. I stood there, in the middle of the living room that still smelled faintly of jasmine, the kind your mother loved. And I realized this wasn't sudden. This was planned, a conversation I wasn't part of, a decision I wasn't included in, and a betrayal I didn't see coming, not from the daughter I raised with my own hands when her mother died, not from the girl who used to say, "This house feels like a hug." Later that evening, Zayan's parents came. No shame, no hesitation. His mother walked in, looked around, and smiled like she had conquered something. "We'll take the master bedroom," she announced casually, her eyes running across the marble floor, the antique shelves, the photographs on the wall. "This place has potential, bit old-fashioned, but manageable." I didn't say a word. Alina stood silently behind them. Zayan came last, tall, polite, always smiling. "Uncle," he said, "we'll take good care of it, I promise." I didn't call him Beta. I didn't reply at all. I just walked out of my own house like a tenant being evicted without warning. I sat on the front porch, watching the sun dip low behind the gulmohar trees I had planted when Alina was born. And I realized something deeper than pain. I didn't lose my home that day. I lost my daughter. I didn't sleep that night. Every corner of the house echoed with footsteps that didn't belong. I heard laughter in the kitchen, cupboards being rearranged, my things moved without permission, and in the silence between it, all I heard my wife's voice, like a ghost, whispering from the past, "This home will always protect us." But now it couldn't even protect itself. The next morning I tried to speak to Alina again. She avoided me, brushed past in the hallway. She said she had chores to help with, that Zayan's family needed her attention. I looked at her and said quietly, "Do you remember what I said the day you got married?" She paused. "You said I'll always have a place to come back to. And now?" She didn't answer, just walked away. But her steps hesitated at the last second. I saw it. And I clung to that sliver of hesitation like a drowning man grabs driftwood. Something was wrong. Not just the betrayal. Something beneath it. This wasn't Alina. This wasn't the girl who cried when we had to throw away her mother's old dupatta. This was someone else. Someone broken, pressured, or worse, manipulated. I began to wonder what Zayan had told her. What he had promised, and why she was obeying him so blindly. I didn't have answers. Not yet. But I knew one thing with absolute clarity. These were not the last papers I would see. And no matter how far she went, no matter who she tried to please, she was still my daughter, and I wasn't done fighting for her. Or for the truth. By the time the sun rose the next morning, I was no longer the master of my own home. The villa that once echoed with my footsteps and my wife's laughter now carried new voices, louder ones, unfamiliar ones. I walked through the front gate and found a small truck parked in the driveway. Movers were unloading furniture, not just bags and boxes, but entire wardrobes, dining chairs, even their own carpet rolled up and ready to replace mine. The air smelled different, like some synthetic perfume trying to smother the scent of home. Zayan's mother stood in the center of the hallway like a queen surveying her kingdom. She was directing everyone with hand gestures, snapping at the movers, and talking over her shoulder without once acknowledging me. Her voice was shrill, authoritative, and she never once looked in my direction until I reached the living room. "Oh," she said, half smiling. "You're still here?" Before I could respond, she walked past me, her bangles clinking like warning bells. She paused outside the master bedroom, the one I had shared with my late wife for nearly 3 decades, and turned to a younger helper. "Put our bed in there, the one with the rosewood frame. We'll use this room from now on. She pointed at me without a trace of shame, can take the servants' quarters. That is, until he finalizes his move." My throat went dry. I looked over at Alina. She stood near the staircase, arms folded, eyes fixed on the floor. She didn't protest. She didn't flinch, but her face, it wasn't blank. It was tired, worn, like someone who had made a decision she was now trying desperately to believe in. "I'm not moving," I said firmly, "and this isn't your house." Her mother-in-law laughed softly, shaking her head. "The papers say otherwise. Papers, always the papers." I didn't argue. I didn't scream. I simply turned and walked to the kitchen, the one place that still felt mine. Or maybe I just wanted to feel the cold marble counter under my palms, a small anchor in a sea that was rising too fast. That afternoon, Zayan arrived, white shirt, dark sunglasses, his usual charm pressed neatly into every word. "Uncle." He greeted me with fake warmth. "I know this must be difficult, but we'll take good care of the house. It's our family's honor now." "Our family?" I repeated quietly. "Which family? Yours or mine?" He smiled like I had told a joke. Alina came into the room just then, offering him water, her hands trembling slightly. I noticed it. He did too, but he didn't say a word, just took the glass and kissed her on the forehead like some actor playing a devoted husband. And she closed her eyes and pretended it meant something. Later that evening, I sat in the garden, watching the movers set up a swing set. Zayan's father insisted on bringing. I remembered building that same garden with my own hands, planted every rose bush, painted that fence after my wife's funeral because I couldn't sleep that week. Now strangers were occupying it, claiming it, putting their stamp on it like it had been waiting for them all along. Inside, I noticed small changes. My wife's painting gone from the hallway wall, her mirror replaced with a gold-framed monstrosity that looked like it belonged in a palace, not a home. Her sari chest, the one she never let me touch, now used to store Zayan's father's shoes. They didn't ask, they just took. And Alina. She was vanishing, day by day, right before my eyes. Not physically, she was there, moving through rooms, making tea, checking on things. But emotionally, she was slipping. Every time I tried to talk, she deflected. Every time I looked her in the eyes, she looked away. That night, I couldn't sleep. I walked past her room and heard voices. Quiet, whispered, urgent, Zayan's. "I told you to keep him calm," he was saying, voice sharp. "He's still here, and it's making things complicated." "I'm trying," Alina whispered back, her voice cracking. "Try harder. The Dubai plan only works if the sale goes smoothly. We don't need his drama." I froze. "Dubai? Sale? What? Plan?" I stepped away before they noticed me and returned to my room, the servants' room now, apparently. It was small, dusty, unused. I sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the wall for a long time. My mind was spinning, connecting pieces that refused to settle. Zayan wasn't just enjoying power. He was planning something, and my daughter, either too blind or too scared, was being dragged along. The next morning, I woke early. Alina was in the kitchen. She didn't see me at first. She was wiping tears quietly, one hand holding her phone, the other resting on the counter. Her phone screen was lit. A message from Zayan. "Don't talk to him about anything. Not yet." She quickly locked the phone when she noticed me. "You okay?" I asked gently. She nodded, not looking at me. "Just tired. You're not." I said softly. "You're scared." She paused. Her lips parted slightly, but she didn't say anything. Then she turned and walked out. She was cracking, slowly, but she was cracking, and I knew this much now. I wasn't just fighting for my home anymore. I was fighting to save my daughter from something far darker than betrayal, because I hadn't just lost control of a house. Something else had taken root inside these walls, and if I didn't act soon, I might lose her forever. The next morning, I wore the same clothes from the day before, unshaven, unbothered by the dust on my sleeves or the lines on my face. There were more urgent things than appearances now. I took the letter I had received, the one that claimed I had voluntarily transferred my villa, and walked to the lawyer's office whose stamp was at the bottom. His name was Mr. Sajid Mirza, a property lawyer I'd never met, never spoken to. Yet somehow he had overseen the legal transition of my home to Zayan's family. His office sat on the third floor of a crumbling plaza near the city court, dark wooden door, tinted windows, his name stenciled in gold lettering that was starting to peel. I knocked once, no answer. Knocked again, this time louder, firmer. More like a demand than a request. He opened the door with a tired face and a fake smile that vanished the moment he recognized the documents in my hand. I'm here about this, I said, stepping into his office without waiting for permission. I dropped the documents on his desk. You claim I signed this. I didn't. He stared at the papers and his face tightened. If it's already registered, then your consent was legally obtained, he said carefully, avoiding eye contact. Flipping through the papers like he didn't know exactly what they were. It's all standard. Your daughter was involved. You were there when I wasn't. I cut in coldly. I never signed anything, but you had my signature. His mouth opened slightly, then closed again. He swallowed hard, the tips of his fingers trembling as he adjusted his tie. The silence grew loud in that small office. Finally, I pulled another paper from my pocket, my bank's original specimen signature card from just 6 months ago, and placed it beside the transfer deed. Compare them, I said. He did. He didn't want to, but he did. And in that moment his expression changed. He leaned back in his chair and exhaled heavily. Sir, I wasn't told you were unaware, he muttered. It was your daughter and her husband who brought the ID, the documents, your photo, your thumbprint, your my what? Your thumbprint, he repeated. They said you couldn't be present due to illness, but that you consented. They brought a scan of your thumb impression, said. It was done in hospital. The air left my lungs. They had forged not just my signature, but everything: documents, identity proof, biometric clearance. It was fraud, beginning to end. But what shattered me more was the implication Alina had access to all of this. My ID, my legal files, even old documents from my safe that I thought no one touched after her mother passed. She must have given them to Zayan. Whether knowingly or under pressure, I still couldn't tell. I stood slowly, feeling the blood rush to my head. If you don't speak the truth when the court calls, I will ruin you, I said quietly. This isn't just property. This is a crime, and your name is all over it. He didn't argue. He just nodded, defeated. I left with a copy of the filing he had submitted. That was my proof and my first weapon. That evening, I didn't return home. I sat outside on the garden bench, watching as the lights came on in the rooms I no longer recognized. From my angle, I could see Alina in the dining room. She looked thinner than usual. Her hands moved like she was serving food, but her body was stiff, mechanical. Across from her, Zayan sat with his phone in one hand, barely glancing at her. His father barked something from the living room, and Alina stood up mid-bite and rushed to respond. She didn't eat again. It was after midnight when I heard the soft knock at the servant's door. Alina stood there, wrapped in a shawl, eyes puffy and red. She hadn't worn makeup in days. I saw you didn't come in for dinner, she said. Softly, I wasn't hungry. She hesitated. Can I sit for a bit? I nodded and stepped aside. She sat down in the corner of the bed like she used to when she was little, quiet, uncertain, full of unspoken words. I went through your cupboard, she said suddenly. I know I shouldn't have, but Zayan said you were hiding things. He said we needed your old documents for property tax clearance. He said it was harmless. I stared at her. You brought him my ID. She nodded slowly, guilt sinking her shoulders. I didn't know, she whispered. I swear, Dad, I didn't know he used them to take the house. Then what did you think you were signing? Something about transferring utility bills. He said it was in my name for convenience, he said. Her voice broke. He said you were the one who wanted it, and you didn't ask me? I trusted him. Her face crumbled. She buried it in her hands and sobbed full-bodied, helpless sobs that came from somewhere deeper than betrayal. I didn't say anything for a long time. I just watched her cry. I thought he loved me, she whispered between gasps. I thought I was doing the right thing. I thought I was protecting him, protecting our marriage. But now he barely speaks. To me, he talks about Dubai, about investments. I asked when we're going. He said I'm not part of the plan anymore. I inhaled sharply. So it was true. Zayan was planning to sell the villa. Alina had just been a tool, a bridge to access, a door to legality. And now that the villa was almost his, he no longer needed her. I reached over and placed the legal document copy on her lap. This is what he made you sign, I said. And this is why we fight now. She looked at the paper, then at me. Can we fix it? We will, I said, but not quietly. Not anymore. That night, Alina didn't return to her room. She slept curled up in the servant bed, holding her mother's old shawl, while I sat beside the window, awake and angry, watching the shadows move in the house that bore my name and now my scars. The very next morning, I stood outside the district court with a folder clutched in my hands and a storm brewing in my chest. I hadn't slept. Alina hadn't either. She walked beside me, pale and quiet, wrapped in her mother's old shawl. The same one she used to hide under as a child during thunder. But this thunder was different. This wasn't nature. This was man-made, a betrayal so deep it left scars on the soul. I had filed the report the night before: property fraud, criminal. Impersonation and forgery, and attached the forged documents, my bank signature specimen, the lawyer's recorded statement. And most damning of all, the messages from Zayan's own phone. Alina had given me his backup password. She said he never thought she'd be brave enough to use it. But that morning she was. Inside his files were voice notes, screenshots, and WhatsApp messages, conversations between Zayan and his parents, laying out their plan like vultures discussing the best time to strike. Get the deed before end of June. Tell her it's for utilities. Once the villa's ours, we can flip it for Dubai money. And worst of all, she's soft, just smile, and she'll sign anything. Those were his words. About the woman he claimed to love, about the daughter I raised. The judge, an older woman with a firm voice and tired eyes, listened in silence as I laid everything out. The forged signature, the faked thumbprint, the misuse of legal ID. I watched as Zayan sat across the courtroom, still trying to look composed, still in his iron shirt, still pretending this was some misunderstanding. His parents sat beside him, their fake shock wearing thinner by the second, but the judge wasn't buying any of it. Especially not when we played the recorded phone call between Zayan and the lawyer the moment he confirmed that I was too ill to sign in person, and that my daughter would handle the documents on my behalf. When asked why no medical verification was attached, the lawyer had no answer. When asked why no consent video was provided, Zayan's voice cracked for the first time. I looked at him, then really looked at him, and saw not the charming husband, not the clever businessman, but a scared little man who thought deception could buy him the world. When it was Alina's turn to speak, the room held its breath. She stood up slowly, her voice trembling at first but growing stronger with every sentence. I loved him, she said. I thought I was being a good wife, but I was being lied to, manipulated, used. I was told the documents were just for electricity bills. I didn't know I was signing away my father's home. Her eyes filled with tears, but she didn't break. He said he wanted a life with me, but the truth is he just wanted the house. The courtroom was silent, not out of disbelief, but because everyone already knew the truth. They were just watching it unravel. Zayan's lawyer tried to argue, said the villa was transferred legally, that no one forced me to sign, but the forensic team had already completed a preliminary analysis, my signature, forged, my thumbprint, scanned and copied from an old medical file, my presence during the transaction, falsified. In less than an hour, the judge ordered an emergency freeze on the property transfer and demanded a full investigation. Zayan's family tried to protest, claiming they had already moved in, made renovations, had dreams, but dreams built on deceit. Don't stand for long. As we walked out of the courtroom that day, I didn't feel victory. Not yet. Just a dull ache where trust used to live. Alina walked beside me, not as a broken daughter, but as a woman slowly reclaiming her voice. I should have seen it, she whispered. He changed after we married. He stopped talking about our future. It was always about money, about your villa, about Dubai. I placed my hand on her shoulder. He fooled you, but he won't fool the law. Over the next 2 weeks, we returned to court again and again. Zayan's lies began to collapse like cheap scaffolding. His bank records showed large, unexplained deposits soon after the villa transfer. A Dubai visa approval email surfaced. His parents had listed the property for a private sale using a fake agency email. Every step they took was one step closer to the edge. And then the final blow. Alina found the original voice memo he had left on her phone one night, drunk, arrogant, saying, once the villa's sold, I'll send a ticket. She can come if she wants or stay with her emotional father. Either way, I'm done pretending. That memo broke something in her, and it sealed his fate. The judge called the final hearing swift and sharp. Mr. Zayan Khan, she said, looking straight into his now expressionless face, you may have married into this family, but you were never part of it. With those words, she restored the villa under my sole name, charged Zayan and his parents with fraud and conspiracy, and ordered an immediate eviction from the property. As officers stood to escort them out, Zayan turned to Alina, eyes desperate. Alina, wait, we can fix this. She didn't even flinch. She looked him dead in the eyes and said, you broke something you can't fix. The gavel hit the wood. Case closed. As we walked out of that courtroom for the final time, the sky opened up with rain, soft, cleansing. I didn't bring an umbrella. Alina didn't either. We stood outside the court steps, soaking, silent, but somehow lighter. She looked at me and asked, can I come home? I looked at her, really looked at her. Not as a victim, not as a daughter who made a mistake, but as someone brave enough to walk through the fire and come out stronger. You never left, I said. The house stood still, like it was holding its breath. The echo of chaos had finally faded, and all that remained was silence, not the cold, resentful kind, but the kind that follows after a storm, when even the walls seem tired. Alina walked barefoot through the villa. The same marble floors she used to skid across in socks as a child now felt heavier beneath her steps. Her shawl clung to her shoulders as she moved from room to room, not inspecting, not cleaning, just remembering. The master bedroom had been emptied out of Zayn's parents' furniture. The curtains, gaudy and gold-trimmed, had been taken down. Her mother's old photograph, which she herself had helped frame years ago, was finally back on the hallway wall. Alina paused in front of it and reached out with trembling fingers, gently brushing off the faint layer of dust from the frame. She stood there longer than I expected, staring, perhaps searching for forgiveness in the eyes of a woman no longer here. I watched from the doorway but didn't interrupt. I knew what it meant to talk to ghosts. We all have too, at some point, later. She sat on the living room floor, knees pulled to her chest, staring at the wall. It wasn't a breakdown. It wasn't drama. It was grief. Not just for the lies or the house, but for the version of herself that had believed in someone who never truly saw her. She had loved blindly, and when the blindfold was ripped away, it wasn't just her trust that shattered, it was her reflection. "Dad," she whispered, barely loud enough for the room to hear. "I can't undo what I did. I can't erase the papers, or the way I looked away while they packed your memories into boxes like they meant nothing." I didn't speak. I let the words sit in the air where they belonged. But I want to fix it. Not just the house. Us. I want to start over, this time. With truth. She turned toward me then, and for the first time in a long time, she didn't look like a daughter begging for permission. She looked like a woman asking for redemption. I reached into my coat pocket and pulled out a small key, the same one I'd given her when she turned 10. I had placed it in a tiny box back then, wrapped in ribbon, and told her, "This will always be your home, no matter where you go." That night, she had clutched it in her palm and slept with it under her pillow, as if it protected her from everything outside these walls. Over the years, I thought she'd forgotten. But when I handed it to her again, her eyes widened and her breath caught in her throat. She took it slowly, carefully, like it was something fragile. "You kept it?" she whispered. "Always," I said. Just like I kept waiting for this moment. The next few days passed in small acts of quiet repair. She cleaned the kitchen like she used to with her mother, rehung the wind chimes by the front door, replanted the jasmine by the garden wall that Zayn's father had pulled out, claiming allergies. She didn't say much, but her hands moved with purpose, not just restoring the villa, but reclaiming a part of herself. Every drawer she organized, every frame she straightened. It was like she was rewriting the story room by room. I watched her from the study window sometimes, not to supervise, not to interfere, just to witness, and maybe to remind myself that healing isn't always loud. Sometimes it's as simple as coming home and choosing to stay. One evening, she brought 2 cups of tea to the veranda, just like her mother used to. She handed one to me and said, "Do you remember the night Mom passed? You sat out here for hours. I thought you'd never come back in." I nodded. The silence scared me more than the grief. She sipped her tea. "That's how I felt these past few months. I was surrounded by people, but I was screaming into silence." I looked at her, really looked. Her eyes no longer held confusion. They held clarity and something else. Strength. Not the loud, fiery kind. The quiet, unshakable kind. "You know," she said, "if it weren't for you, I would have still been inside that prison, thinking it was love." I didn't need to respond. Some truths don't need echo. They settle in the space between 2 hearts and do their work quietly. That night, she moved back into her old room. She didn't change much, just replaced the curtains, put fresh sheets on the bed, and left the door slightly ajar like she did as a child. I walked past before sleeping and saw her sitting at the edge of the bed, holding a photo album. I didn't stop her. Some memories need to be faced alone. But when I turned off the hallway light, I paused and said, "Good night, Alina." She looked up and smiled, the kind of smile that says, "Thank you for not giving up on me." And in that single smile, every moment of betrayal, every paper, every courtroom visit, it all began to fade. The next morning, the villa felt different. Brighter. Not because the curtains were new or the rooms were aired, but because for the first time in months, it felt like a home again. Not a battlefield, not a business deal, just home. I found Alina in the garden, barefoot again, watering the jasmine saplings. "They'll bloom soon," she said, not looking up. "Mom used to say they always come back, no matter how harsh the winter." I nodded. "So do daughters," I said quietly. She smiled, wiped her hands on her shawl, and walked over. "I don't know where life goes from here," she said. "But I know where it begins again." I placed a hand on her shoulder and looked at the villa, weathered, worn, but still standing, just like us. "Yes," I said, "it begins here."